Hello, everyone out there in Radio Land. It is once again that time of the week. What time of the week is it? Well, it's that very special time of the week where we dig underneath the headlines. We examine from a critical leftist lens the issues that are going on here in Kalamazoo, here in the state of Michigan, here in the United States of America, and all over this whole entire gosh darn world. And generally, we call out the establishment on their BS. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM, WIDR Kalamazoo, or Western Michigan University. No matter how insightful and or dope they may turn out to be. So, we've got some stuff to talk about on the program today. Some local votes of some imports happened over at the City Commission Monday night. There were a couple of good things. I will say, to their credit, it will be a public bathroom constructed downtown area. And that will be very helpful. It's been something that's sorely needed. Hopefully, we'll have more public bathroom infrastructure up throughout the city. Because again, for a city of our size, and also to have something accessible for the homeless population that isn't necessarily a business, will be a great boon to the city. They also instituted a fireworks ban that basically brings it to parity with that of the state of Michigan's recommendations. Essentially, just there's a few days around the 4th of July and New Year's Eve, and I believe one or two other days where you're allowed fireworks, rest not so much. For myself, I actually do believe this is very much a good thing. Fireworks are very disruptive, and in particular can be very harmful to people, particularly veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, and of course, it's also very alarming to many different kinds of pets, such as dogs. Now, there was also an unfortunate vote, but valiant attempt by Kalamazoo nonviolent opponents of war to try to get the city commission to take a stand against Israel, in particular, the way in which the Israelis have been treating the Palestinians and the Gaza Strip. Well, we'll get deeper into that later in the show. For now, why don't we go ahead and start off? This is something that's going on today. You might not have been aware of it, but it is extremely significant. The degree to which this particular strike is going on in this particular city, I'm actually not too sure. But for those of you who don't know, both Uber and Lyft drivers have kind of chosen this day to have a mass strike, which actually has a global reach. And I think for my part, I'm going, since, I didn't take the time to really, I've spoken with a lot of Uber and Lyft drivers in my time here in Kalamazoo, but none specifically about this strike. So I'm not exactly sure to what degree Uber and Lyft drivers here in Kalamazoo are participating in this strike, but this is part of a global strike movement that is calling for solidarity both from drivers and passengers for today. Do not order a Lyft or an Uber. So I'm going to read a bit from an article from Jacobin chiming in on this organized strike. And by the way, if you don't know Jacobin, I would highly recommend it. It is the magazine of choice, particularly if you are a democratic socialist or a social democrat. I will say, if you're more of an anarchist, anarcho-communist, or straight up communist, you might find it a bit too liberal for your tastes, but they do a lot of really great analysis and reporting. And this is a very good summation of kind of the issues revolving around this strike and why the drivers are striking. So this is written by Mark Bergfield. For years now, ride-sharing app and technology company Uber has been in the headlines for its abysmal labor practices. These include algorithmic management practices which surveil workers and constrict their decision-making power, and its classification of its workers as independent contractors or self-employed rather than employees. Now, this is very important, and I'm going to let y'all know who are listening. This is going to come up. This is going to come up later on the test, so make a note of that. As the company goes public today, as in on the stock market, drivers will be out on strike across the globe. With this work stoppage, drivers are demanding a say in how Uber works, a pay raise, and above all, being recognized as employees. Thus, today's strike reflects the emergence of a collective consciousness among drivers, which would have been impossible even a few years ago. Moreover, it underlines the double-edged nature of contemporary employment relations and the way they employ technology. By classifying workers as self-employed or independent contractors, Uber has created the conditions in which these groups of workers once again want to be counted as workers. Historically, such struggles for recognition have been the basis for broader social and economic struggles which brought about the 8-hour day, the right to vote, and the welfare state. Oh, by the way, I can see from the phone, it looks like we're getting a call. I will tell you, whoever's listening in, I can't actually patch you in, and you usually encourage people, if you do want to call, we take short little breaks every half an hour. That's probably the best time to call in if you have something that you wanted to suggest or a correction you wanted to make to us while we're on air. If it's not anything that immediate, always encourage you to post up on our Facebook page. That's the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. So anyway, getting back to this article. On the other hand, Uber drivers are using the very same digital technologies which control their working lives to organize across cities, countries, and even across borders. That is, it kind of speaks to a double-edged sword of modern activism. It allows for very quick mobilization and networking, i.e., social media like Facebook. Of course, these are it's the very same apparatus that is used to track us and sell to us and invade our privacy. So, unlike previous decades where an employer's control over the physical work site could prevent communication and action between workers, technology has reduced the effectiveness of such tactics. Lastly, today's work stoppage shines a light on how the replacement of localized taxi cartels by multinational rideshare companies, backed up by venture capital and private equity, are creating a globalized sector of workers. Such global action would have been unthinkable in formerly localized industries regulated by local municipalities. In effect, Uber unwittingly created the basis for shared consciousness and action among workers across borders. So one of the things this Jacobin article is pointing out that is very intriguing and honestly a very big concept when you step back and really think about it. Today's strike action is a global strike. It is happening all over the world. Now, we talk a lot on the show about the need for socialism to be international in character. This is international in practice. It opens up the idea for many possibilities. It reminds me, in effect, of a lot of people remember fondly the Arab Spring and the way that it used internet, social media to basically create this firestorm of resistance across the Middle East. Would eventually, around that time, also heavily influenced Occupy Wall Street. So that is, a highly unique aspect of kind of like the good edge. The good edge of internet culture is it allows this kind of international organization with a speed and scale heretofore much more difficult to realize, to say the least. So, going back to the article, the company promises flexibility and freedom for its drivers, but this promise remains unfulfilled, as journalist Sarah Kessler's Gigged has shown. Which is a book. I have not read it yet, but I have heard good things about it. Really is a strong kind of left-leaning critique of the quote-unquote gig economy that we currently live in. Workers might have begun ride-sharing because of these promises, but quickly came to realize that they had become indentured servants in late techno-capitalism. Uber lured people into taking out loans for high-end cars and refused to cap the number of drivers as the taxi industry previously had. This means that individual drivers can hardly live off the number of rides available, creating a battalion of indebted workers unable to pay back their loans. The freedom Uber promised is simply the freedom to work away one's leisure time, or what the company calls monetizing one's downtime. Instead of flexibility, drivers are thrown into a life of being constantly, quote-unquote, logged on. So I will speak a little bit, kind of talk about the local level. Now, I can't speak from hands-on experience being an Uber or a Lyft driver here in Kalamazoo, but I can speak from, I used to drive cabs for a company called Take Me Transportation. And even then, this is like in the pre-Uber Lyft days, even then, being a taxi man, a taxi woman, a taxi person in Kalamazoo was very sporadic work. There would be good nights where, I would make a few $100. There would be really bad nights where maybe I made less than 50. Kalamazoo, in particular, it depends on many factors that, in a big city, you're not going to have that are really going to kind of decide whether what kind of wage you're going to be making that night. What I mean by this, Chicago, New York, cities like that, they are always busy. There's, there are always going to be available fares. Kalamazoo, there's not always going to be a whole lot of fares. What ends up happening is Kalamazoo kind of is bottlenecked in that way where even when the cab companies were the ones doing rides in Kalamazoo, it was hard to make a consistent and steady living just as a cab driver. It's been a lot of people do cabs or Uber or Lyft in Kalamazoo to kind of subsidize their wages, like, basically a second job. Most of the people I encounter when I personally have to get like an Uber or Lyft from work, for instance, talk about it being kind of like a supplementary job. Again, though, this still, though, it killed the market locally for a lot of cab companies, a lot of the people who did depend on cab work as their primary employment. And when they talk about, too, like, when they don't cap the number of drivers, that means even though there's a steady number of fares, a much steadier number of fares, consistent number of fares in these bigger cities, there's going to be a very inconsistent number of drivers. And the more drivers that are on the road, the less fares there are to go around. So whereas in Kalamazoo, it's more kind of a result of demographics, whether the students are in town or not, et cetera, et cetera. In these big cities, it is a crisis that is completely manufactured by Uber and Lyft, who are trying to get drivers to basically compete with one another to a point where, again, not enough fares, too many drivers, and nobody's going to make enough to live off of just that. I think ideally they would like all of their drivers to maybe only pick up a few fares a night and work as like part-timers. But at the same time, they've also coaxed people into investing tremendous amounts of their own money and savings into being an Uber or a Lyft driver. So let's keep going with this article. Governments and legislators have embraced this model of indebted servitude. A detailed report showed that rideshare lobbyists succeeded in getting city and state level legislators in the United States to simply copy and paste companies' draft regulations for their industry. These companies' political links to municipalities and governments are what's made their business model viable. This is not only the case in the United States, but also in Europe, where the European Commission frequently invites Uber lobbyists to high-level conferences on the future of work, and hailed the company as an employment motor, particularly for groups of workers previously deemed quote-unquote unemployable. Some governments are finally taking action to curtail Uber's power. The California Supreme Court decided to make it more difficult to classify workers as independent contractors if a group of workers is central to the company's core business. Yet this alone will not suffice. Governments and municipalities also need to reclassify Uber as a transport company. This would force them to set pay according to sectoral collective agreements. In January, an Italian court ruled in favor of 5 former Foodora riders, forcing the company to pay them according to the collective bargaining agreement in logistics and merchandise transport. The same could work in the case of Uber. Other approaches involve projects like the Fair Work Foundation, which rates the working conditions of the digital labor platforms. It'll operate much like the Fair Trade Foundation by providing a label to companies with good work practices. However, these approaches rely on the voluntary choices of consumers and offer no enforceable mechanisms. Another alternative would be have a worker-controlled ride-hailing app which would distribute the profits generated by drivers equally and would reinvest surpluses into a retirement insurance fund for workers. This would allow drivers to have a long-lasting career as drivers. Again, this is something we harp on the show a whole lot. Worker cooperatives, democracy in the workplace. And this is actually an interesting case because, the problems that we just talked about, this could easily democratize and not only democratize, but make something like being an Uber or Lyft driver far more viable for a lot more people. Again, it's hard and very stressful to have a job where your pay is completely dependent on chance, on how many drivers are on the road and how many people need a ride that night. Ensuring some kind of income stability is not only the morally right thing to do, but would make for a much more efficient company with better, less stressed out drivers and better customer satisfaction, if I dare say. If one thing is sure is that the drivers cannot rely on the goodwill of governments and legislators. The Uber drivers' strike reminds us that it requires collective action to change the balance of power in the industry and create the conditions for legislative change. Again, that was Mark Bergfield from Jacobin. The title of that article, Delete Your App. I would encourage anybody interested in the strike, please, go do your DuckDuckGo, and we'll follow up on the story too. See what is the depth of the economic impact that this strike is going to have, because as we said before, this is a global strike, primarily in the very large metropolitan cities. That is a lot of profit 24 hours profit on a global scale. That's millions and millions of dollars in net losses. So with that, let's talk about, I wanted to mention this little bit of good news here. And it's in the Midwest. It's over in Wisconsin. And this is from peoplesworld.org. It's kind of the it sees some of its precedent as ancestor, descendant of the Daily Worker, which is a very popular socialist communist newspaper turn of the 20th century. But this was published yesterday, and it says a Native American communist topples incumbent council president in Wisconsin town. Ooh. So this is from Ashland, Wisconsin. I'm going to go ahead and read from the article here. The Democratic Party primaries have been heating up across the nation over the last year, with progressive Democrats like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York elected to Congress and an array of Democratic primary presidential candidates all pushing progressive causes. Local elections have also taken place that deserve special note. One of the more interesting of these happened last month in Ashland, Wisconsin, where a Native American, Washaya Whitebird, who is also a member of the Communist Party USA, defeated the city council president David Matille in a nonpartisan contest. While there has been some media attention to self-described socialist candidates winning elections in bigger cities, in northern Wisconsin now, for the first time in its history, a communist is on the city council in Ashland. Whitebird defeated incumbent Matille 52-42. Whitebird, a worker at a town deli, was in an excellent position to engage one-to-one in person with voters in the period leading up to the election. A member of the United Food and Commercial Workers, he decided to run for office, he said after talks with labor and community leaders. Not in anyone's wildest imagination was an openly communist Native American challenging the city council president ever expected to win the election. Talking about his opponent, Matille, Whitebird said, "I asked him to come and have a town hall debate. He would always respond that he was too busy." Whitebird ran an old-fashioned working-class political campaign. He had a small but dedicated group of volunteers. He went door-to-door and held community meetings. The main message of his campaign was higher wages, affordable housing, and more homeless shelters. Not exactly the militant indictment of capitalism many communists have been stereotyped as always putting forward. Now in a position to act on his campaign promises, Whitebird plans to introduce a city ordinance to increase the minimum wage. His proposal is different from many bills passed in other states calling for across-the-board but gradual $15 minimum wage hikes. Instead, he said his ordinance would depend on the size of the business. $10 for local/state, $13 for national, and $15 for international. Something else he is bringing into the politics of Ashland and into the U.S. politics, too, is for-profit industrial and agriculture ventures operated by city governments to generate revenue instead of increasing taxes. Whitebird is a member of the Bad River Band of the Lake Superior Chippewa. It isn't an uncommon practice for indigenous governments to own and operate for-profit enterprises to provide employment revenue for the benefit of their citizens. By admitting I'm a communist, I cast a beacon for those who oppose me, but also for those who agree with me, Whitebird said, seeing his election as an opportunity to build a coalition around working-class issues in the city of Ashland. So, yeah, again, big congratulations to Washaya Whitebird. And, I just got to say, it's, we say time and time again, there is a history of socialists, and particularly socialist candidates in the Midwest. Wisconsin has a very deep and rich history of that in particular. I've talked a bit about Milwaukee and their history of socialist mayors. But I think this really goes to show there a lot of people talk about, is it too radical? Is it off-putting to openly run as a socialist or a communist? And I don't think there's any easy answer for that. It depends on where you live. It depends on how much support you can get from the working class population in your city. But I don't think the answer to that, and maybe just a few short years ago, like 10 years ago, somebody would tell you, yeah, that's a death sentence. There's no campaign that could get off the ground as an open socialist, or let alone an open communist. It really is a sea change. Again, somebody here in the Midwest, an open communist, got elected as a city council president in this town of Ashland here. And it goes to show, too, if you really focus on the meat and potatoes, the kitchen sink issues, when you're going out and doing these campaigns, people can and will follow, and they will support you. Don't look at socialism or communism as like a scarlet S or a scarlet C, because people are fed up and they are looking for somebody who's willing to protect their interests and protect the interest of workers. And they're less interested in what label you have, and more interested in what your plans are, what your policies are, and what you can do to help the community. So again, big congratulations to him, and I'm sure he's probably going to be pretty busy, but I'm really hoping maybe I can find a way to contact this fella and have him on the show, because it is very interesting and fascinating. You got a communist winning, open communist winning just across the lake. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and take a little break. Y'all are listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Depression can take many forms. It can feel like static in your brain, or as if everything around you has lost meaning. It can debilitate even the strongest of people. 89.1 WIDR is here to tell you that there is help and a way to improve mental health. WMU offers counseling for all students in the greater Kalamazoo community at Syracuse Health Center. There is no need for an appointment for first-time visits. Open counseling times are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. or Thursday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Syracuse is located at 1903 West Michigan Avenue, Kalamazoo. For more information, please call 269-387-3287 or visit www.wmich.edu/health center.
listeners and
Hello, everyone. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So, as we mentioned on the show, and once again, I will make this entreatment to the listening public out there. Do you consider yourself particularly knowledgeable and well-spoken? Do you consider yourself a radical? Maybe it's a socialist. Maybe it's a communist. Maybe it's an anarchist. Or you're just a democratic socialist, or maybe even like a radical liberal. We haven't rarely had one of those on the show for a bit. If any of the above, we are looking for new blood, new talent for the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. Gotten a few people to bite, but I again am trying to cast out a really broad net. This is particularly if we're particularly looking for anybody who is a current WMU student, somebody who would be willing to get trained up so that they can run the booth for our programs when yours truly cannot. And of course, representation is important. So anyone, particularly people who do not identify as cis, white, or male, it's kind of like that Simpsons joke. The no homers club. It's like, oh, but the other Homer is up there, and they all joke. They're like, oh, well, we're allowed to have one. Yeah. Yeah. So, if you're interested, please let us know. Easiest way to get a hold of us, go to our Facebook page, the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, or you can email us directly at hoodratstrategist@gmail.com. So, again, the need, our dear co-host Nora is moving on out to the west side deluxe apartment in no, not really. But I wanted to. I'm hoping intermittently. I'd love to have her back on the show whenever she's in town, and particularly, I'd like to do more of an in-depth exit interview with her, but she did record a message for all of us. I wanted to take some time to go ahead and play that. This is our dear co-host Nora with a very special departing message for all of you listeners out there.
hello, listeners and comrades of Kalamazoo County. This is Nora Getz, one of your regular co-hosts at the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. Here to let you know that, unfortunately, I will no longer be a regular co-host of this lovely program. The reason for that is I got laid off of my job pretty recently, and there isn't really much IT work here in the Kalamazoo area, so I'm having to relocate. But fortunately for me, there's more jobs and possibly even a further training grant for where I'm moving to, so that's pretty exciting. I won't be too far away, staying in the Chicago area. I may even have a new radio show similar to this one to be a part of. So stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for my next guest visits here on the Hoodrat Strategist. Thank you for giving us your listens. Thank you for playing our show on YouTube or on the radio or wherever you listen to it. And keep fighting the good fight for that revolution solution.
That, again, was Nora Getz, and, Godspeed to her. I know she does get a show out there in the Windy City. I will be listening to it every chance that I can. So, let's, what we should talk about next. This is an interesting article, and This, for those of you who closely follow Michigan politics, this is not necessarily new news, but this article from MLive really summarizes some, very interesting and need-to-know points about some the unique potential for corruption in the Michigan legislature. And I'm mostly going to be reading through this article without a whole lot of commentary, maybe like some bits here and there. But I think it is important to bring home that, yes, in fact, Michigan is not only kind of just as corrupt at a baseline level as, the general, capitalist government of the United States, but actually allows for... I'd definitely say more obfuscation of conflict of interest and, kind of concealment of the sort of legalized bribery that has become the status quo of our current political system. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and read from this article. This was published May 6th and was written by Lauren Gibbons. In 2015, a Michigan lawmaker chaired a committee hearing where an oil company president testified to a bill amendment that would benefit his company. But the legislator didn't mention he was selling his land to the business. That same year, another lawmaker sponsored an amendment that benefited ride-sharing companies while also moonlighting as an Uber driver. Oh, actually, that kind of relates a bit to the last story we were talking about. Anyway, and in 2016, a legislator whose daughter was a circuit court judge voted to give $12,000 in raises to circuit court judges. Potential conflicts of interest such as these are a problem in Michigan, experts say. That is to say, more of a problem than, America more broadly or generally, which is saying a lot. Because, the rest of America isn't precisely squeaky clean when it comes to this stuff either. Michigan is one of two states, and the only one with a full-time legislature, with no requirement for public officials to disclose basic financial information, including income sources, business investments, gifts, and travel compensation. Really, think about that. One of two states. So, again, it is not public record, what kind of financial entanglements our legislators up in Lansing actually have. And, again, I suppose if you went by the standard of the current president, but anyway. Actually, you know what? I guess he did release his tax returns recently, or some of them. I'm not exactly sure. Sorry. I've got a bunch of stories today about, workers' resistance and imperialism. I didn't read too much about our corrupt president's tax returns. That is. So anyway, not getting too sidetracked. Goes on to say, without any legal requirement on financial disclosures, Michigan residents only know about potential conflicts of interests if their lawmakers choose to reveal them. And really, who would? Unless you're real dumb or just that brazen. The lack of financial disclosure requirements is one of the biggest reasons Michigan ranked last in the Center for Public Integrity's 2015 State Integrity Investigation, which rated each state's transparency laws. Potential conflicts of interest or corruption in the state remain buried in an honor system with no honor, the report concluded. not much has changed in the past 4 years. In Michigan, people are still unable to define how these conflicts of interest are playing out in the legislature because of these lack of reports. Said Kristen Hernandez, state politics reporter for the Center for Public Integrity. In the interest of transparency, MLive Media Group created a financial disclosure form modeling it after forms used by several governmental bodies, including Congress. MLive is asking the governor, attorney general, secretary of state, and each member of the state House of Representatives and state Senate to answer basic questions about their finances. How it works in Michigan. Conflicts of interest policies are in place through state law and legislative rules, but there are few mechanisms to regulate or enforce violations. Michigan law states no legislators shall be interested directly or indirectly in any contract with the state, any political subdivision thereof, which shall cause a substantial conflict of interest. And give me just a second, folks. I'm going to go let my co-host in. Be right back. Hello. So, we're back. Lawrence is joining me on the program now.
Yo, what up?
Yep, and I'm just going to wrap up this story real quick. I do encourage everybody to read it because it is really fascinating, and it goes into depth of just like kind of the problems that created by the uniquely corrupt or corruption enabling structure and rules of the Lansing government. Just summing it up, Michigan is one of two states with no requirement for public officials to disclose basic financial information, including income sources, business investments, gifts, and travel compensation. It really, our state, Lawrence, we talk about like money and politics all the time, and like our state is really unique in that it just provides an umbrella, a wall. We don't have any way to hold politicians accountable. I mean, a lot of good it does us for a lot of the corporatists in the United States Congress, but here we don't even have that basic information.
I mean, it's not surprising. We had senators vote to deregulate Wall Street from Michigan after Michigan was devastated by the deregulations of Wall Street. I'm talking about Debbie Stabenow and some of the others that voted alongside the criminals that ripped off our country. We have senators and House of Representative people here in this country, in this state, that's not for Medicare for all. because when you go on openssecrets.com, they take a lot of money from the health insurance industry. Even though an overwhelming majority of Americans support Medicare for all. So the fact that Lansing is corrupt and that there's no transparency on who's buying our politicians, there's no transparency when it comes to who's on how we can even tell, or we can't even get the information, is not surprising. It's just people covering their own tail. Yeah, and that's really what it is. It's like we live in an age where the powerful will cover their own tail, and when they have to cover their own tail, it's usually because they've done something wrong.
So I want to read this comment from they asked Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey about this. He's a Republican from the Clark Lake area, and this is some golden logic and facts right here. Listen to this one. Okay, he said he would absolutely not support financial disclosure. Why? He argues it could deter new candidates from running for office in the era of term limits.
Wait, what? What?
I think,
what?
Technically, he's not wrong. I think with this, reading between the lines, yeah, it would deter very certain kind of candidates from running for office, i.e., most of them who are looking about their time of office as a profit-making enterprise. It's almost as if you put in these new rules, it might facilitate or give room for people to run who, oh gosh, I don't know, didn't have a commingling of financial interests that might be encouraging or giving them incentive to run for office.
I mean, yeah. I want to run for office. I want to run for office so I can be a lobbyist later for the industries that I am making rules for now. Yep. That is, I forgot who said it. It was one of the presidents that said it. That if you get rich while being a public servant, that means you wasn't being a public servant. Like I forgot. I can't remember who said it, but the idea is, why do you think people like Bernie Sanders or others, for the longest time, they weren't even millionaires when it came to their salary? When it comes to a lot of our representatives that we call progressives, why they are fighting for the poor middle class? A lot of times, yeah, they make more money than the average American, but in comparison to everyone else that is corrupt, they're not making nowhere near as much. Look at Joe Crowley. Yeah. Joe Crowley was just on MSNBC crying and telling people, telling the Democratic Party not to look at his race. Not to look at his race like any representation of.
Don't look at the man behind the curtain.
Yeah,
no, please don't.
Yeah, don't look at his race like it's any representation of how the Democratic Party should move forward. But when you look at that race, it is literally the haves and have not. He outspent her like 10-1. Mm-hmm. He outspent AOC like 10-1, and she was literally a bartender, like, from her neighborhood. She was a bartender from her neighborhood who went up against one of the most powerful people in the world in our body politics and won. And it only makes me laugh. Like the statement that Republican says shows you how much he does not care about the constituents he's supposed to be representing. Because if you're representing your constituents, then transparency shouldn't scare you.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it shouldn't scare you at all. But saying that, we're scared about term limits and we're scared that it's going to deter people if we tell Americans where we're getting our money from.
Yeah, Michiganders specifically.
Yeah. Because look, let's keep it real. We talk about this all the time. 93% of Americans believe that money corrupts politics. And that's an overwhelming majority of Americans. And an overwhelming majority of Republicans also hate crony capitalism and hate corruption. This is why you have so many Republicans who are like went on C-SPAN and some others saying that they're now flipping to Bernie because even though they may disagree with his policies, they know that he's not being bought. Like he's not corrupt like the rest of the swamp monsters. And that swamp monster who gave that answer is a clear representation why you should be scared.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to kind of leave off. We'll move on to a new story, but again, I recommend everybody read this. They did some pretty extensive journalism here. Kudos to them. But they lay out a few examples of how this has actually manifested itself in our state legislature. So some of the examples include former state senator Darwin Boer voting on legislation to give Michigan Circuit Court judges, including his daughter, $12,000 raises while combing through thousands of House and Senate legislative journals. And then there's another one down here. Let's see. Senate Minority Leader Jim Ananich, a former teacher, voted on a bill about teacher pensions in 2012 after caucus legal counsel told him it wasn't a conflict of interest. Ananich, a supporter of requiring financial disclosure forms, had abstained from an earlier vote on the bill out of caution. And then goes on to talk about, again, this ties into the first story we talked about with Uber. Michigan Campaign Finance Network was the first to report on former Representative Pat Somerville's side job as an Uber driver during his time in the legislature. He sponsored an amendment to prohibit airports from outlawing ride-sharing services, although that language was ultimately changed once the bill went to the Senate. And then in 2017, MLive discovered that former Representative Ray Franz did not disclose he was selling his land to an oil company while considering a bill that would have benefited that company.
Wait. So you're telling me that this legislature was crafting bills and adding language to bills that was putting money into his pockets?
Yes, yeah, very directly too.
That's not surprising at all. That's literally the corruption that we talk about, that we talk about on this show 100% of the time.
Yep.
I don't think
like just one more here. Ed McBroom, a Republican of Vulcan, not the one in Star Trek, of course.
Wow.
Yeah. Hey man, so we're nerds, all right.
But I hope they do not live long and prosper. Like I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that. I was wrong. That's wrong. I'm not sorry, but I'm just saying that should have worded that better. But
well, I mean, he is going to prosper because he did not vote on Senate Bill 150 because his family farm could financially benefit it, he said. McBroom is a dairy farmer, and the appropriations bill included money for dairy producers across the state. Now that is actually an example of good practice. He's like, wait, I'm part of this industry. I shouldn't vote on this.
Oh, man.
He was actually being a little bit ethical. Good for him. But it's, again, bad when this is an ethical choice that they need to make instead of like a very basic rule like it is in the rest of the states.
It's not like the rest of the states show at least their representatives will have the courage to say, yeah, I'm taking this money from these organizations because I believe in these organizations. At least they will have a better lie. Our representatives are just saying, nah, dog, you don't need to know. Close that curtain. You don't need to see. You don't need to see the person behind the curtain. just know that I got your back. And like it is one of the reasons why a lot of people tune out of politics, man. Because when you see this type of corruption, you're like, what are we going to do about this? And how do we fight back? This is the reason why I advocate for Wolfpack to get a nonpartisan, it's a bipartisan amendment to get money out of politics. This is the reason why I support that. It's because if we did have that amendment, then this type of corruption would be outlawed. And this type of corruption, if somebody was doing this type of corruption, they would be put in jail. Because think about it, if I in any other way, if I'm taking money from, if I'm betting on a game, right? I'm playing a basketball game and I'm betting on my team to lose, right? And then I convince everyone on my team to lose so we can make more money. That is fraud. If I lie on my taxes and say that I make more money than I actually do, that's fraud. In any other way, same thing with this. If I'm taking money from a multinational corporation and I'm telling my people I'm going to do what's on the best interest of the American people as a representative, that's fraud.
Yep. It certainly is.
Like, those people would go to jail. Like it's, I don't know, maybe that's too simplistic. Maybe that's just really simplistic, and maybe because I'm just tired. But dog, like it makes literally no sense.
Well, I hard agree on that, and I think with that, let's take a little break and come back. Well, we got a lot to talk about still.
Oh man, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I want to talk about Ilhan Omar. I want to talk about. I mean, we can talk briefly about Trump's taxes. That's just funny.
Okay, yeah.
And I do have.
Actually, I would love it if you filled me in a little bit after the break, because I was telling the listeners earlier, it's like I haven't followed that at all. I know that they came out. I know that there's apparently the clown lost a whole bunch of money, which really isn't surprising. But
it was that, and also, man, we gotta talk about. I want to speak on free speech, like I've talked about it on my Facebook page, but I do want to speak on how Facebook has kicked off a bunch of different people, and we have to talk about that.
That is a really important story. That thank you for bringing that up. We forgot to really talk. I forgot to mention that in the show notes. Or the show chat, that is.
Oh no, so, yeah, we got a bunch. We got a bunch of news to talk about, but we're gonna get some water and come right back.
Yep. All right, y'all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Is your RSO looking for new ways to get its name out to Western's campus and the greater Kalamazoo community? Why not use the wider airwaves? For more information on how we can work together to promote your organization and events, go to widrfm.org and click on the Airtime and Sponsorship page under the Support tab.
right, y'all, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. What did you want to hit on first, Lawrence? I know we were talking about a few things during the break. I've been talking about like some statewide, local stuff for a minute here.
I usually come in with the national and some statewide stuff, but there was some fire that happened this last Monday at the city council meeting that you were just telling me about. Okay. That is an interesting story, and that also will tie into another story that I do want to talk about with John Bolton and a couple other people trying to provoke tensions with not only with Iran and with Venezuela. Like Iran's I'm not going to bury the lead, but there's some stuff that Iran's doing now because of what we've done as Americans. And yeah, it's crazy. That's a whole crazy situation that I know we're going to talk about a little bit later. But this story that you were telling me about that happened on Monday, bruh.
Yeah. So
please explain.
Okay, let me give you a little bit of background on this. The Kalamazoo Nonviolent Opponents of War, KNOW.
KNOW.
Yeah, they've been working on this for a while. They've been going around getting petitions and signatures for a draft resolution that basically they wanted the city commission to declare, this is according to the text of their proposal, it called on the city of Kalamazoo to basically make a city-sponsored declaration that calls upon members of Congress to end U.S. military aid to Israel and redirect that money to unmet community needs until Israel abides by international law, stops engaging in human rights abuses against Palestinians, and ends the military occupation of Palestine. And would have called on members of Congress to support the right of both Israelis and Palestinians to live in safety and security, condemning violence by either side. As I said, there were only two who voted for this resolution. It was Commissioners Don Cooney and Shannon Sykes.
Shout out to Shannon Sykes, man.
Yeah, I'd say
that lady is about that life, man. But Eric, bruh, yo. We gonna have a conversation, bro. Yo, Eric, you want to come on the show and we gonna have a conversation, bro.
Yeah, it's internationalism is important, man. And what I did my whole 4 minutes up at the podium, citizen comments, and what I was really trying to push, and actually there was a citizen, literally the guy who spoke right before me spoke exactly the opposite point that I was making. So the guy before me, he kind of set me up really well, actually, because he said, I pose this resolution, it's way above your pay grade. Why not protest the deforestation of the Amazon? It's not the commission's task to take this on. And the comments I had prepared, it's let me explain to you why this is a local issue and you should pass it. And I think, now, if you listen to the show enough, we tell you time and time again about just the awful state of affairs with Israel and Palestinians. Short hit list. There's some eloquent speakers who really talked on this on Monday night, including two people who ran for Congress, both Paul Clements and David Benak came in and dropped some really important information and knowledge. David in particular talked a lot about exactly what Israel is doing to Gaza, which again fits any textbook definition of genocide to me. And even a lot of UN reports have basically said the Gaza Strip will be literally unlivable by next year.
Let's be clear. The former Prime Minister of Israel called what was going on in Gaza akin to apartheid. The Prime Minister before Bibi Netanyahu saw the inhumanity that Israel was doing to other human beings, and Bibi Netanyahu said, "Yo, we gonna throw some D's on that." You know what I'm saying? We're gonna turn up. The thing that makes me upset is that every time we speak on Israel and we speak on issues about Israel, even when it comes to a local on a local level, we are forgetting the fact that Israel is the superpower in this situation. That they have the better weapons. They have the better
the power dynamic.
The power dynamic between Israel and Palestine is not equal. It's one kid has a bigger bat, the other one is throwing rocks and sand. And the other issue that I have when it comes to it being a local issue, I'm very upset when it comes to us criticizing Israel from a policy perspective. On the March of Return, Democracy Now! Talked about it. Israel shot children and grandparents and
specifically
nurses.
Specifically targeted medics, the elderly, disabled, vulnerable people.
So and because of them killing vulnerable people, there's been a spark of rocket fire against Palestine, against Israel, and Israel back against Palestine. We cannot find peace if we're constantly swinging at each other. Like we cannot in one way say that that we want to find some type of resolution if we are constantly giving money and giving aid to one side so they can always kill each other, so they can kill each other. I'm not saying that people can't defend themselves. People have the right to defend themselves. But when the United Nations is saying that Israel has not only made situations worse, but they are escalating, which they have said on multiple issues, and that we are enabling that by giving them money, giving Israel more money, the fact that they have universal health care and we don't. And it's counterproductive to what we say we care about as harbingers of peace.
Yeah, and one of the things that really made me groan when at that meeting was a lot of the people who were against the resolution. They had this picture of the Israeli-Palestine conflict that was very outmoded. It was kind of like cherry picking certain facts. Is like, if you've ever seen the documentary Occupation of the American Mind, and I would really recommend this to my listeners, it felt like I was hearing all of those talking points from the citizens coming up to the commission. They kind of pointed out of context that this idea that all Palestinians want to eradicate Israelis, want to eradicate the Jews. This is based on like a very old document from like the 1960s, 70s, from a particularly radical section of Palestinian resistance. And, look at it. They also just ignored the facts on the ground. Look, here is where we're at. And, when we're talking about pyrodynamics, this is going to be very important. Yes, there are a handful of very radical Palestinian. I don't know what you'd call it, like
gangs, militias.
Yeah,
Hamas is a thing.
Yeah,
and Hamas is a problem, but Hamas is a problem because Israel keeps shooting and killing and dehumanizing the Palestinian people.
Exactly. Like where does Hamas recruit from? These people don't just grow out of the ground. I want to really be clear here. There are those radicals in Palestine, but they are a minority. They are a minority. They do not have the power or the momentum of the movement, which in recent years has been very much not that of nonviolent protest. Israel, on the other hand, they have a government in power that is increasingly reactionary and right-wing. As a matter of fact, one of the things I really didn't like here, because, as again, those bad faith talking points, equating left-wing criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. But in fact, it's the Israeli government that is far more right-wing and reactionary than the opposing side. Like you talk about Palestinian terrorists who want to see Israel eradicated. These people are marginalized among their own people. In Israel, there are literally Israeli Jews in the Israeli parliament that talk about exterminating Palestinians. They are in seats of power.
Oh no! In the last election, the ACLU came out and said that a good portion of the right wingers that got elected in the last election were far right wing extremists that are akin to the KKK.
Yeah.
And they are akin to the KKK in Israel.
Yeah, I mean,
and Bibi Netanyahu was making sure to put them in power, while at the same time disenfranchising people of Palestine who are living in Israel to vote. Mm-hmm. So it is a hodgepodge situation. It's not a pretty situation, but at the same time, if we say that we want to get to peace, then the person who has the bigger stick may want to decrease the violence that they're bringing to the table.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like if I can't control how someone responds, but I can control my message to them. And if my message to them is, yo, we want peace, then as the bigger person in that situation, literally, if I'm being Israel in this case, as the bigger person in this situation, the more powerful person in this situation, than me saying, yo, I want peace, then I need to take that much more restraint on trying to get there. Even if, I'm not saying that they don't have a right to defend themselves or strike back, but at the same time, they should not be, violence shouldn't be the first and only answer. Yeah. To this situation. I think it's important, really at the root of it, it's, you don't have to condone violence, but I think what you can condemn is the double standard at play here. Because, again, one of the things like the people who are in opposition to the resolution brought up is like, well, they fired a bunch of rockets into Israel, just over the weekend. But, where this double standard is that we can ignore or have a cognitive dissonance about the policy of abject cruelty that is the Israeli government practices towards the people, Palestinians and the people of Gaza. But the minute the Palestinians respond violently to this abject cruelty that includes deliberately targeting non-violent civilian protesters with live ammunition, the moment that side gets violence, they lose all. They're supposed to lose all credibility. I mean, what was the quote? I shared it to y'all. I shared it to you a while ago, and I can't even think of the quote now. It's only violence when you throw back the tear gas, right? Like when it comes to protests, the protest only becomes violent when the tear gas is being thrown at the people that shot it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Again, I'm not trying to excuse what the Palestinians have done in the past. The Palestinian Hamas and others has gotten violent and they've gotten cruel. Not even gonna lie and say they haven't. But the United Nations, when the United Nations have sided and saying, "Yo, Israel, y'all are in the wrong here, and y'all know y'all are in the wrong here. Y'all need to stop." When the United Nations says, "Nah, dog, they have a case to make," and you literally ignore it. And then you ask for your allies to back you while you're doing wrong. Like, that makes us culpable for the lives that are being lost.
Oh, yeah. And I wanted to circle back to a point. The first point I really wanted to get across. Why is it important for local governments to come out on international issues like this? And, it goes back to a story that we talked about a lot on the show, where there's a lot of states in this country that will outright say, if you're going to be, a state contracted employee, you have to sign this contract that says that you stand against the BDS movement. That's boycott, divestment, sanctions. Again, these are some of the same nonviolent tactics that were used to successfully bring down the apartheid regime in South Africa. And those are local decisions made by cities, made by state legislatures. They did not say, oh, this is an international issue. Oh, this is above our pay grade. No, they went and said, we are going to value a foreign government's interests over our own citizens' free speech. So in that context, yes, I think it's vitally important that a city like Kalamazoo take a stand and call out Israel for the human rights abuses that it has been committing. That's why it's important in that context. And to say that, local governments shouldn't make that decision. Well, they are. They are doing that right now. They're doing that on the other side. And frankly, I think it's an abdication of responsibility.
Think about that. And I won't think about that dynamic, that whole double standard that you just got done speaking on. Yeah. The state government can make a policy saying that, citizens, if you want money from the federal government, you have to support another government that's not ours. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yet, if we say, we want our money not to go to these people until they stop breaking human rights laws and they start treating human beings like actual human beings, then we have people saying, oh, dog, that's above our pay grade. We don't want to do that. Or you're being anti-Semitic. And let me be 100% clear with everybody. Arguing that Israel should, should not break human rights laws when it comes to the people that live in Israel that are minorities, that's not being anti-Semitic. That's literally asking, the people who are in power over here, can you treat other human beings like human beings? That's not me being anti-Semitic. That's not me saying I hate Jews. Those are two different things. And I do not want us to be misconstrued when you hear people talk more about these type of stories, because that will happen. You will get gaslighted and people will say, oh yeah, you're just being anti-Semitic. No, I'm not. I want to be. I'm pro human rights. Yeah, I'm pro people. I'm a humanist.
No, same. And I will say, it might be tricky. Okay, maybe this is something I shouldn't say, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think invoking historical trauma to defend the Israeli government's is gross. I think it's really, really gross. One of the second people up spent the whole time talking about the Holocaust, and it's just when I hear that argument, because that's what Benjamin Netanyahu will do. He will in the same day do a speech about the legacy of the Holocaust and the horrors that were perpetrated upon the Jewish people, and then maybe that same day he will take more land in the Golan Heights, or he will cut off Gaza for an arbitrary period of time in an act of collective punishment.
It's the same. It's a Ben Shapiro type of talking point. When Ben Shapiro tried to blame left-wing anti-Semitism for the attacks on the synagogues, and the Jewish temples.
Because right-wing white supremacists read The Nation all the time.
Yeah, and that, but that's the thing, and that's the thing that I don't think a lot of people don't get. You can be a absolute bigot and be Jewish. You could be a person who do not see the humanity in other human beings because of their religion and still be pro-Israel. There's a bunch of right-wingers that do it all the time. The thing that I think that makes it so upsetting is that we act as if those two things cannot coexist at the same time. And look, the Holocaust is absolutely horrible, and it was absolutely a horrible thing. But that doesn't change the fact that since the Holocaust was a horrible thing, you are then allowed to do other horrible things to disenfranchise Muslims in your country. Yeah. That doesn't make sense. That's like saying, yo, your dad, your dad's a horrible person, and your dad's done horrible things to other people. So that gives you the right to stab your neighbor's cat. That doesn't make sense.
I mean, it's not like a 1-to-1 correlation though. Yeah. It's like it's not to say like, because we went through this, we're allowed to do this. It's always used as like. That's what's so gross to me about it. It's used as a prop to obfuscate. It's like, somebody's about to burn your house down, and then their friend comes up to you with like a shiny set of keys. It's like, oh, look at the keys, and it's like, but you're burning my house down. It's like, oh, but look at this thing,
right?
Look at this problem that I have. It's and yeah, again, using historical trauma as a prop to create cognitive dissonance about the human rights violations of your government is it's gross.
It's absolutely gross, man.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about this marijuana story that
definitely, yeah.
This is a local story that me and you, if you want to read from the article, you definitely can. So just a quick transition back to some other local news. State of Michigan, as y'all know, we legalized marijuana, recreational marijuana back in November, which is fantastic. Still can't buy it openly yet. You still need a medical marijuana card to go buy some.
Yeah. Pro tip: you can always legally you can get marijuana from a friend as long as it is given as a gift. So, if you wanted to like sell, say, like a $45 stick figure drawing with a free marijuana gift, that is something you could legally do.
God. Okay. Yeah, we're going to get demonetized from YouTube. How do you skirt the law? Where Andy I go. That's how you get away with murder. Where Andy I anyway,
I'm just saying.
Hey,
in a situation
we're not allegedly. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Yeah. But the state of Michigan has decided, and this was a story that was a few days ago, that caregivers will no longer be able to sell surplus marijuana to dispensary centers or provisioning centers. So if you are a caregiver, if you're someone who is legally allowed to grow marijuana in your house, basically you are a micro grower, and you have a surplus of marijuana, you are no longer allowed to sell it at dispensary centers, at provisioning centers.
Yeah.
Which literally makes no sense to me if that is how you are making your money. Because selling it out of your house would be technically illegal for you to do, and you would then be eligible to go to jail for something that is legal in the state now.
Yep. And actually, one thing I wanted to relate this back to. So last week on the show, we were talking about how like the city had that meeting about what our cannabis economy should look like. City Attorney Clyde Robinson, his argument is like, let's put the brakes on it. Walk forward with caution. A lot of people very unhappy about it. Myself, I had kind of like a third opinion, which was we shouldn't set up a cannabis economy in Kalamazoo until we can have a just cannabis economy and one that is equitable, one that puts the people of Kalamazoo in the driver's seat and not necessarily these kind of international corporations to come in to set up a bunch of dispensaries, these kind of fly-by-night operations, and delegate people who had been working in a very like independent underground capacity to essentially work at the cannabis equivalent of Walmart all of a sudden.
And that's basically what it is. It's because the corporations have seen that marijuana is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and that it is a liberty issue that they want to now take control of said industry. So all the people that's been brewing, all the people that's been growing, all the people that's been doing basically that business now are going to be undercut by multinational corporations, and that's literally what the state of Michigan is doing. It makes logical sense. We let Nestle steal water from Lake Michigan so they can sell it back to us.
Yeah.
So it makes logical sense that they're like, hey, the young man, the individuals that were growing out of their house to make a profit, or growing out of the house just to survive, to make a little money, you're no longer going to be allowed to do so because we have other companies that's going to be giving us money to do so.
And I think this relates in its own way to the kind of story we were talking about earlier, with how Michigan's legislature has unique capacity for corruption. Because again, this is what happens when marijuana is legalized in a state that is predominantly run by corporate bought Republicans and a lot of corporate bought Democrats. Let's be frank. I don't hear a lot of Democrats in the state legislature calling foul on any of these rules that favor large, wealthy corporations with a lot of capital to come in and set up the marijuana economy, rather than working class people who basically were the marijuana economy before it became legal. Again, it's only like certain progressive figures, like Abdul El Sayed when he was running for governor. This was a big point he had about a just cannabis economy. But the cannabis economy in Michigan is being set up in such a way that it's going to favor the very wealthy, while delegating, working class people, even people who've maybe been working in this industry for many years, in a worse situation than they were in before. Again,
it disenfranchises those that were already disenfranchised, even though they've already been doing it before it became legal. It still allows you to be arrested for it still allows people who are doing so, basically a legal way for them to still get arrested for a drug that's now legal in the state. It also provides a way for those who are now sellers or caregivers to basically make it harder for them to make a profit, which means that's not putting money back into our economy. That's literally stifling growth in our local economy, because those people will no longer be able find it much more difficult for them to be able to get their product out. So you're hurting your own constituents, and this type of bill will hurt not only our local economy, but it will also hurt the constituents that these people say they care for, because they passed a bill that let it be legal.
Yep, and I will say this law isn't all bad. And one of the things it does require is there is a provision that caregivers can sell to licensed cannabis and dispensary businesses after the products have been tested. Now that's very basic, like health and food safety type stuff, but it does require more licensing and kind of more red tape for a lot of these growers to be able to sell their surplus product. And again, if you want, sorry, I'll let you.
Go ahead.
If you want a just cannabis economy, you have to make sure that these independent growers have as kind of efficient and cheap way to become part of this economic pipeline as possible. When you make those kind of stumbling blocks or build those kind of erect those paywalls up, that again monopolizes the money and power towards these rich corporations that again are using the legalization of marijuana to literally take this money out of some of the most marginalized communities in the state. It's like, I mean, as you or I know, like most of the people I knew selling weed growing up, they literally did it to keep food on the table, or like, you know, make sure they could pay the bills at the end of the month, stuff like that. So go ahead, Lawrence. I know you wanted to chime in on something.
I was gonna say, correct me if I'm wrong, but just to get a license or to be a caregiver takes a good portion of money, and to even try to open a dispensary, I think, costs a couple K. Like,
yeah, opening a dispensary or like a marijuana business, like the cheapest is $150,000. I don't know who you know who's got that kind of money.
Like, right, $150,000. Like, Jesus Christ. So like, yeah, just to remind everybody, half the country makes less than $30,000 a year. A majority of growers that I know don't even make that. And a majority of caregivers that I know don't make that at all. So you're disenfranchising a bunch of people. Like, that doesn't make any kind of sense. But anyway, there's a couple stories that I do want to talk about that are national news. I mean, we have to talk about the presidential election. Well, I mean, we have to talk about some of the Democrats. I think last time I was here, Joe Biden did not announce that he's running, but now he has.
Man. I was gonna say, man, we need another 2 hours.
Oh my
unless
God.
we want to, unless I want to talk about his record, like at the same tempo, cadence, and speed as Busta Rhymes.
Oh man,
I don't think we have.
Oh man, I don't know. It depends on what Busta Rhymes song you're talking about. Are you talking about?
My hands where my eyes could see. That's like
no. That was Slow Buster. That was Slow Buster. That wasn't Fast Buster. Fast Buster is break your neck. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
oh man,
or you don't touch me now. But no, okay. Before we next week we'll do a deep dive into his past. I just there was a story that came out recently, a video that came out recently. Shout out to Emma Vigeland from Rebel Headquarters, TYT Rebel Headquarters. They resurfaced a video of him giving praise to Dick Cheney. Did you see that video?
Oh,
Did you see that video? Like him praising Dick Cheney because Dick Cheney was nice to him. I'm like, yeah, you know, that's like women saying, you know, Ted Bundy was nice to me. Yeah, you weren't one of the women he killed. Like Dick Cheney's a war criminal that should be in The Hague, and he convinced the country to go into an offensive war with a country that did not attack us. He overstepped his boundaries as president as the vice president of the United States. He got he got thousands of Americans killed, hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians killed, and he enriched himself while doing it. And you're telling me that's someone who you like as a Democratic president? Like, forget the fact that he doesn't support Medicare for all. Forget the fact that he doesn't support free college and tuition. Yep. There was a recent video of him saying that belittling millennials, saying, millennials tell me that they have a hard time. Give me a break. And he literally belittles the system of corruption that we have right now that he helped be a part of.
I will say this, and next week we'll dive deeper into it, but like the thing with Joe Biden is like, look, I've got problems with everybody running. There's no perfect candidate, but he is the only one running who's like, they are actually trying to force somebody who, just by all the metrics that are necessary to win the election, is like the only one who is like way worse than Hillary Clinton, right? Like the mainstream media. No, this is the reason why I wanted to bring it up, because the mainstream media has clearly shown who they want. They want either Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, and or Joe Biden. It's one of those five. Andrew Yang gets smeared.
even though Andrew Yang gets smeared, and I don't even like Andrew Yang all that much. Like he's a decent candidate. He doesn't support universal free college and tuition, but he does support universal basic income. But the way that he supports universal basic income is kind of like how Nixon wanted to do it, which I personally have a problem with. But the fact that he's even bringing up UBI as a conversation, I am absolutely happy about. They smear Elizabeth Warren, but they don't smear her as much as they smear Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie Sanders. So, but Joe Biden, and the other reason why I wanted to bring it up is because that CNN poll that showed...
they're up to their old... Any of y'all who were around for 2015, 2016... Oh, my God.
Okay,
they're at it again.
Just a quick hit.
Shenanigans.
Right, before we get to this other story, just a quick hit. For those who did not see it, Joe Biden... there was a CNN poll that had Joe Biden basically leading Bernie Sanders and the rest of the field by like double digits. When you look into the methodology of the poll, they only polled people who are over the age of 55 and made more than $85 to $100K a year. So they polled people who are rich and old.
So I mean, they're not gonna have any kind of internal bias about that, would they?
Right. Like, dog. Like, I'm sitting here like, and this was, and remember, the only other reason why I wanted to bring up this story is because I didn't get a chance to talk about this story when it happened. There were some meetings with Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, the lady from Center of American Progress, Neera Tanden, and Pete Buttigieg on how to destroy Bernie Sanders. They were having these meetings and these dinners on how do we deal with Bernie Sanders, because obviously they have polling showing that Bernie is blowing, like internal polling from the Bernie Sanders campaign showed that Bernie's leading Trump by double digits in all the Rust Belt states.
All the Rust Belt states. The states that he won in 2016 against Clinton.
So all the Rust Belt states that Trump won in the general against Clinton, Bernie's beating Trump by double-digit points.
Yeah. I do want everybody to understand, like we've mentioned on the show before, that like the people currently running the Democratic Party, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, all of their financial supporters, when we say, they would rather have Trump than Bernie Sanders, we're not being hyperbolic and we're not exaggerating. That is 100% true. Again, you look at it, this is what the Democratic Party is focusing their energy on. It is not on how to most effectively win a midterm election against Donald Trump. It's how to stop a actual left-wing populist such as Bernie Sanders. And again, they're also fearful of Elizabeth Warren as well. But
Elizabeth Warren will play nice with them a lot more than Bernie does. She's but they fear her on Wall Street just as much as they fear Bernie because Warren doesn't play. But at the same time, the issue that I have, and this goes back to Biden. Biden's first fundraiser was done with multinational billionaires, and so he's showing that he does not get where the country is. He does not understand where his party is, and he believes that he can run the same type of campaign that he ran back when he ran for president before, and he's going to get obliterated. I think I made this prediction on this show before that there's going to be a Final Four. I have to put it to 5 now because of recent town halls and recent good answers that I've seen people smart politics. Some people who have been showing that they are actually smart politicians. So I said it was going to be Warren. I said it was going to be Bernie, Warren, Kamala, and Kirsten Gillibrand. That's why I said that was my original 4. I'm taking Kirsten Gillibrand out now because she's tanking. Yeah. But Buttigieg and Cory Booker had some really good answers. And Uncle Joe I still think he's not going to make it past Iowa. I don't think Uncle Joe's going to make it past Super Tuesday. Mm-hmm. But those other three, Kamala, Mayor Pete, and Corey, they might make it to the final five.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, if it'll be interesting to see how it turns out.
Amy Klobuchar, I know I keep saying Cloud Bootjar. I watch too much secular talk.
I mean, I think there's a lot of people in the establishment run Democratic Party who are looking at Joe Biden as the great white hope. And while he doesn't have the DNC in the tank in the same way Hillary Clinton did in the way to her election, there's still like the people who are the capitalists who are running the party. That's their guy. So it'll be interesting to see how much more fuzzy math we'll see in these early primary states.
He does have President Obama's mailing list.
Yeah,
and for those who don't understand what we mean, every presidential candidate has a list of mailers or people who they ask for money from. Mm-hmm. President Obama raised a tremendous amount of money from Wall Street and other sources that today we find as unacceptable because we see how money corrupts politicians. Joe Biden has a lot of that same tide. Mm-hmm. So I'm still going to hold on to my prediction that I don't think he's going to make it past Super Tuesday, or he will drop out sometime after Super Tuesday. But yeah, as of right now, and I can't get mad. A lot of the polling shows that he's leading, but a lot of times when you look at the polling, they oversample older voters.
Yep.
They do not sample millennials, Gen Xers, and also the disdain that a lot of mainstream media has for millennials and Gen Xers, forgetting the fact that the oldest millennial that will be eligible to vote in 2020 will be 38.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The oldest millennial will be 38.
We are adults now.
Right, you know what I'm saying? And so to not understand what's going on in our body politics with us, or with our generation, especially in you're saying that you want to represent our country and our values, the progressive values, because an overwhelming majority of younger voters are progressive, you are literally going to kick yourself in the face.
Yeah. So I think with that, let's take a break. I don't know if you can hang out for our next segment. Hopefully, we've got a guest going to be calling in. She's going to be talking about Black Mama's bailout. It's coming up this weekend and for the rest of the month, I heard. So this is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Is important. From deciding Kalamazoo's best drunk food to picking the fan favorite for Wider's Battle of the Bands, voting allows people to voice their opinions and change their world. To vote for offices such as mayors, senators, and the president takes a little more than a link to a Google Forms survey. Before you vote, you have to register. This can be done in person, by mail, and in many states, online. For more information, you can point your favorite web browser to vote.gov.
Hello, everybody. So I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty here, but I did want to make sure to at least talk about Black Mama's Bailout real quick here. So for those of you who don't know, Black Mama's Bailout is something that started a few years ago. And the idea of it is basically around Mother's Day. We collect money, we find people, find mothers who could use some help getting out of jail so they can be with their families on Mother's Day. I'm going to play a quick video. This is from the National Bailout website, which is kind of the organizing umbrella which these folks run on. So let me go ahead and play this video real quick, and when we get back, we'll talk about it just a bit. So
this year for Mother's Day, we're getting together to bail Black mamas out of cages and get Black mamas free. Thousands of Black mothers are trapped in jails, separated from their children, their families, and their communities because they cannot afford to pay bail.
These people have not been convicted of a crime. These are just people that are languishing just because someone said that they may have done something. Bail has been a true driver and determinant of folks' freedom versus their detainment. In the past 2 years, we bailed out over 300 community members. We've been able to support a good majority of those folks, and we've been able to really be in community and fellowship. This May will be our 3rd year that we will be bailing out Black mamas and caregivers from your local jails and immigrant detention centers. Mamas and caregivers should not be held in cages.
This year, make your gift count. Bring a mama home for Mother's Day.
Yeah. So, again, you can go to nationalbailout.org, find out more if you'd like. They do have like a portal for you to donate. And just so you know, this is being organized locally. If you'd like, I believe it's Shannon Sykes and Alicia Johnson from Mission for Liberation who are doing a lot of the direct organizing for it here in town. So get hold of one of them, or you can get a hold of me too, and I will make sure to hook you up with the people who are doing this here in Kalamazoo. But yeah, again, if you'd like to get involved with the local campaign, please hit them up or me. They're actually going to be doing this throughout the month, from what I heard. So, again, it's not just going to be this upcoming Sunday. They're going to be trying to continue these efforts through the month, try to reunite these families and really do something tangible about, again, cash bail as a system is unjust to begin with.
It is new debtor's prison.
Yes.
That is what cash bail is. Cash bail is new debtor's prison. How are you going to put people in jail that has not been convicted of a crime, and you're telling them that they have to sit there until they can pay for it? How can they pay for it if they do not have to go? If they do not have a job, or they cannot go to work to make money? You're forcing people to stay in a facility where they're probably doing manual labor in many of these facilities for free. Let's
pennies an hour
or pennies an hour. So let's not act as if we are not being inhumane when we talk about these new debtors prisons, and that's literally what it is. I absolutely 100% support this. I support that 100% all day. And I will definitely be donating some money on my next check to this. Shout out to Sykes, man. Jesus Christ.
Yep.
Big boss Sykes, man. Yep. We need to get her in here.
Well, it's I definitely, I know she's been doing some stuff with We the People, Michigan. Unfortunately, I don't know if I didn't bring this up as a story. I believe the last city commission meeting is going to be her last meeting as a voting member. Moving out of the city, so not legally be part of the commission after that.
Oh, man.
But Godspeed to her. Good luck with the I know she's still going to be doing a lot of organizing work. So
yeah, man.
Yeah. So, Lawrence, I know was there a few other things I know we wanted to make sure we hit on. We got about 5 minutes.
So just a national story that I don't think got enough press attention because there's a school shooting that happens every other day. There was a school shooting that happened in Colorado that I wanted to just give. I don't want even I want to say give my thoughts and prayers out to the people, but one died. Other 8 was injured by 2 gunmen that went to a school that was minutes away from Columbine in Colorado.
Yeah. It's very close to the anniversary too.
So the reason why I wanted to bring up not just that school shooting, it's also the NRA trying to disparage a Democratic legislature because the Democratic legislature ran on gun reform policy that happened later this week. And the reason why they ran on gun reform policy is because of things like this. Is because of the school shooting, because their child was killed by gun violence. The new president of the NRA went after a black lady, and I forgot the lady's name, because her platform that she won on was gun reform. And the reason why she ran on gun reform is because she wanted to curb things like the school shooting and other mindless shootings that happen around our country. We're swimming in a sea of guns. We need to talk about it a lot more. We don't, because we have become numb. We have become numb to the fact that school shootings happen in America. And by the time I am done saying this, there will probably be one that will happen within the next few hours. It's insane. Literally insane. But yeah.
So here's a really important story that I wish we'd had more time on the show to get to, but I at least want to tell y'all folks about it and give you at least the bones of it. This is a fact that's kind of come out. The Intercept had a really good article about it, and it's what I was going to read from. But look it up. It's by Layla Ujeli. It was published yesterday. The Pentagon is reporting low civilian death tolls in Syria and Iraq. Without accountability, people will keep dying. And I'll just read real quick from it. Defense Department reported approximately 793 civilians were killed by the U.S.-led coalition in Iraq and Syria during its fight to uproot ISIS. While the report lists a higher number of civilian casualties in 2017 than had been previously reported, the figures pale in comparison to findings from an unprecedented joint investigation by Amnesty International and Air Wars, which concluded that the U.S.-led coalition killed at least 1,600 civilians in Raqqa during just 4 months in 2017. 2018 figures are similarly asymmetrical. The Pentagon's assessment reports 120 total civilians deaths as a result of U.S. military operations in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia, while Air Wars found that the U.S.-led coalition killed between 821 and 1,712 civilians in Iraq and Syria alone.
Remind me, which one of the 8 countries we are bombing right now? Which one of those wars are we in that is now old enough to vote?
It's be Afghanistan, and Iraq's getting right up there.
Iraq's in 2 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Iraq is in 2 years after that. Jesus Christ. The thing that makes this should be a international. This should be a national tragedy and an international tragedy. This is something that the Democrats should be talking about. I'm glad that Tulsi Gabbard's in the race and she'll be on the debate stage so she could bring this up constantly. Why are we still there when we know that we were lied into these wars? Mm-hmm. Why are we still there when and we don't have a a symbol, a inkling of what victory looks like, of what does the end game looks like. Even the Marvel universe had an end game. Even the Marvel universe had a way they was gonna wrap this whole thing up, and that was a 10-year journey that we've been on with the Marvel universe. You're telling me that our military industrial complex doesn't have an end game?
Well, I mean, if we're gonna be like a little nerdy about it, the original Iron Man movie was kind of a commentary on, international arms sales and the war on terror and how a lot of our arms and munition fuels it. It's funny to think that a comic book movie that made some kind of light satire about that. The actual lifespan of that. I was about to do a really bad spoiler. Never mind.
No. It doesn't make sense that movie back in 2000. No. You want to know what doesn't make sense? And this is the thing that doesn't make sense. Since that movie, let's just say since Iron Man came out in what, 2008?
Yeah,
2008. How many movies have you seen that was about war, that was anti-war movie?
Ooh,
right. So you're telling me that the fact that we are murdering civilians. Chelsea Manning went to jail, went to prison, went to solitary confinement because they told us, the American people, that not only were we killing civilians and laughing about it, we were double tapping the first responders. In our name, our military was doing that in our name with our money, and you're telling me, and we're comfortable with the Pentagon lying to us, when the generals have said multiple times we don't need a lot of the money that we are getting because the money that they're getting is going to their weapons contractors. That's fueling this mess. It is as asinine and as devastating of a story that we are the biggest threat to the world when it comes to our foreign policy, and we don't talk about it enough to actually make a change.
Yeah, there've been a lot of international polls that show most other countries view us as the number one threat to world peace.
I mean, dog, we're trying to go to war with Venezuela and Iran now. Like we're literally trying to do that now. And we're already bombing 8 countries. We are drone striking countries in Africa right now, in Somalia and other countries. We didn't even declare war in those countries. You know what I'm saying?
No, yeah,
so
exactly.
It shows just how. It shows even more reason why you need people like Tulsi Gabbard, and you need people like Bernie Sanders, and you need people who are anti-war. You need people like the anti-war people that went to the city council on Monday.
Okay, shout out to you, KNOW.
We need people like that to speak up even more, because that right there, all of us should be ashamed of. Every single one of us in America should be ashamed of. The reason why? Because nobody in America would accept that if that was happening to us.
They surely would not. All right, and I think with that, we're about at the end of the show. I want to thank y'all for tuning in. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. Sorry. And again, if you want to check us out, we've got our page on YouTube, our page on Facebook, Hoodrat Strategist radio program. And again, we upload all of our episodes after the fact. Until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.